So first of all, I would like to apologize. It really shouldn't have taken me over a month to get this video done, but I can't really change that now. So, 18 years of the wall crawler swinging onto our home consoles, and it's all led to this. Activision, Neversoft, Vicarious Visions, Treyarch, Beanox, an awful lot of people have all tried their hand at creating the ultimate Spider-Man game, but back in E3 of 2016, we found out that a well-known studio with a pretty shining track record was going to be taking their own spin on the web slinger.
Insomniac Games, famous for their work with Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet & Clank, and Resistance, and I guess Sunset Overdrive if anybody remembers that game happening, were working on a brand new title for the PS4 featuring everyone's friendly neighborhood web slinger. Interestingly enough, Insomniac was never approached about making a game about Spidey specifically. They had a deal to work on a game based on a Marvel property of their choosing, and the team almost unanimously agreed that the character they would want to work with the most was Spider-Man. This wasn't a forced tie-in or a quick cash grab. The team began working on this project because they loved the character and were passionate about doing him justice, and that's a pretty good sign if you ask me.
Still, over the past couple of months, we've seen a lot of adaptations of this character, some of them hits, and some being The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but the question still remained. Would Insomniac be able to bring something new to the table, and how would their version of the webhead hold up among all the others? Well, spoilers at full force here, alright, because we're about to swing right into Marvel's Spider-Man.
Right off the bat, this is one of my favorite openings to any Spider-Man story. We get a bit of a glimpse into the life and traits of Peter Parker, and this short little camera pan shows us an awful lot about who he is and what he can do. And also, how sloppy this young man's apartment is. Sweet Christmas. Peter's phone goes off and the police radio lets him know that the NYPD is finally about to put Wilson Fisk behind bars. And then the game decides to just go and make me real happy. This is the perfect way to start off a story with this character. He's excited, having fun, the music is great, the colors are bright and heroic, and within seconds, the game puts you in control of everyone's favorite part of Spider-Man. The web swinging is just about perfect. Simply hold down the R2 button and Spidey swings on a web. Press X to jump and use the left analog stick to move around, and that right there is the basic controls. It actually does handle a bit differently than it has in the past, particularly when it comes to jumping off a web. In past games, you would hold down the jump button while swinging to charge the jump, letting go of the web when you let go of the button. But here, pressing the jump button at any time will have Spider-Man let the web go. This caught me off guard at first, but I had the hang of it within minutes. The level of control you're given while swinging is really impressive, but I'm gonna tell you this right now. Keep the R2 button held down often. Holding it down does a lot more than just have Spider-Man swing on webs, as it also allows him to interact with obstacles in his path, letting him run up walls or along their side, dodging or maneuvering around objects in his path, and of course, it helps him move forward faster, even when running. You can also press L2 and R2 together to web zip onto corners or surfaces of certain objects, and keeping the R2 button down will let you vault right off of them, even further if you press the jump button at the right moments when bouncing off of objects. Of course, if you already have the R2 button pressed down, you can just tap L2 to zip onto objects. Really, if you want to keep moving forward quickly, there's very little reason not to have the right trigger hugging the back of the controller like a long-lost friend. With a little bit of swinging around, Spider-Man is led to his objective through set pieces and eventually an objective marker while he makes a quick phone call to a police captain he's formed a bit of a friendship with, Yuri Watanabe. Yuri tells him that they're having some trouble getting to Fisk and they're gonna need his help ASAP. A group of cops ends up getting cornered by some of Fisk's men, and it seems like a great time to introduce us to the combat mechanics the game has to offer, and man, these are some of the best I've seen so far. On the surface, it's easy to make the comparison to the combat system here to that of the Batman Arkham games. The Arkham series is set primarily around mashing the attack button and waiting for the counter icon to show up. By pressing the counter button, Batman will react and counter the attack with one of his own. On basic enemies, you can basically spend the whole day just pressing the counter button and eventually every goon in the vicinity will hit the floor like the Mask of Phantasm's box office numbers. Batman also has this uncanny ability to just go rocketing across the room to whatever enemy he seems to be throwing a punch towards, but Spider-Man wasn't trained by the League of Shadows like the Caped Crusader, so his combat style isn't so much based around making someone else's attack turn against them like a ninja. Spider-Man has a little bit of a delay between his action and reaction harmony to combat. Spidey doesn't counter, at least not without a bit more direct input from the player. When he is about to get hit with an attack, his spider sense goes off and by pressing the dodge button, he'll get out of the way. Dodging works in the air, on the ground, and even in the middle of attacks, but you need to watch your timing. A fight should never be seen as a mindless act, so you need to stay aware of the movements of your opponents and watch for the best time to dodge out of the way. With a little bit of practice, you'll have it in no time. He also lacks Batman's ability to fly straight to an enemy by sneezing in their general direction, so he makes up the difference with a web zip. By zipping to an enemy, Spider-Man can close the distance between them and teach any thug's face what a fist wearing spandex feels like. Of course, not every enemy is the same, and some will require different tactics to take out. Some carry shields, so you can either vault over them or slide under to hit them from behind. Some are party size and need to be webbed up before you can get a few good licks in. And some carry melee weapons, so they can block your attack, so you gotta hold down the attack button so you can knock them into the air and maybe give him a new perspective on how crime doesn't pay.
Get down here and fight like a man!
I don't suppose I could convince you to come up here and fight like a spider.
There's plenty of variety here, and by shuffling in a certain number of enemies or different types, the fights stay interesting and keep you thinking about the new ways you can knock people about. Once you make it to Fisk Tower, Yuri gets the picture that maybe the police are in over their heads in this situation and might require some special forces. Our boy swings on in, and we get to see how webs play a larger role in Spider-Man's combat style. You can web up enemies and keep them incapacitated for a bit, or, if they've taken enough damage and are close to a wall, they'll be stuck to the surface. You can also use webs on airborne enemies to help bring them back to their face, and even swing webbed up enemies around and toss them like a projectile at their buddies. The environment is part of your arsenal again too, as plenty of objects in most environments can be caught by one of Spider-Man's webs and given express shipping to someone's chest. We also can't forget about the focus meter. By attacking enemies, you'll fill up this little meter under your health bar that can be used in a couple of ways. With a full meter, you can activate an instant finisher that can take enemies out right away. It's always fun to see, but I can't help but worry about what happens to some of these guys when you perform a finisher on them. The focus meter can also be used to heal Spider-Man, but it doesn't need to be full to work. If you find yourself in a pinch, hitting the down button on the D-pad will get Spidey back in good standing and give you another chance, but it does also drain what you could have used for a finisher, so in a tough situation where you find yourself surrounded by enemies, you might have to choose between a quick heal or evening the odds. I could go on for a pretty long time just about how varied and well-crafted Spider-Man's fighting ability is in this game, but there's still a big baddie to take down. After some fighting and climbing, pushing and punching, Spidey finally makes it up to Wilson Fisk's office. Also, I know that Fisk's whole setup is kind of themed around this Asian decor, but I still like to think that these samurai suits are a subtle nod to Enter Electro. The Kingpin of Crime is trying to get his escape plan ready by getting up and building walls between his relationship with the Webhead.
You do know I can still see you, right?
After taking out his turrets and putting them to good use, Spidey and Kingpin tussle around for a little bit until our hero finally gets the better of him. New York's finest take Fisk away in cuffs, but not before Kingpin spares a few words for our crime fighter.
Good luck, Willie. I have a feeling you're gonna need it.
Idiot! I'm the one who kept order in this city! 1 month! In 1 month you'll wish you had me back!
Spider-Man congratulates himself on a job well done, but doesn't have too much time to celebrate. While Spider-Man's work might have gone really well today, Peter Parker is running late for his own, and the Webhead rushes over to his real job. He enters a laboratory to join his partner, and... That right there is some fantastic visual foreshadowing. So this is an earlier version of Otto Octavius, when he's still got that brilliance and hint of wonder in his eye. He and Peter have been working for some time to create neurally controlled prosthetics for the disabled, but unfortunately, without Peter around, Otto grew impatient and decided to try to test the device himself and accidentally frying some of the circuits controlling the machinery. The grant committee arrives and isn't exactly thrilled with all the smoke they're seeing and have a stern conversation with Octavius about how dangerous this site has become and about the future of his funding. Otto reassures Peter that everything will be alright and tells him to go ahead and take the day off, but Pete decides to go ahead and look at the equipment himself and gets it working properly again. Here, we have some simple puzzles. I know that not everyone is always thrilled with this kind of stuff, but I actually really enjoyed these segments. The puzzles start off simple enough, but in time they start to become a bit more of a challenge. What I really enjoy about them is how they're integrated with the story. There's some optional puzzles in the lab that unlock as the game progresses, which show Peter either improving the functionality of their equipment or helping Otto find new materials for their prosthetics. Peter gets the arm working properly again, but sees that Otto is still wrapped up in trying to calm down the grant committee, so he decides that it's probably a good time to start patrolling the city, where the open world side of the game starts to come into play. The city of New York is open to you, with an absolutely insane amount of detail, pedestrians to interact with, crimes to stop, and missions to accept. You're never railroaded into taking up a story mission when you don't feel like it. That pacing is left entirely up to you. You can spend as much time as you like just swinging around the city, stopping car robberies, halting bank heists, which, by the way, I think is really neat that the game switches to a fixed camera angle for these sections. There's just something about it that feels really cool during gameplay.
There will even be times when thugs have set up bombs and trucks and stuff and you'll have to get rid of them, which I kind of question Spider-Man's method of doing so.
Gotta disable it.
Hole number 17, 338 yards, dogleg left.
Make people consider the pros and cons of maybe not breaking into places and helping Yuri fix the NYPD's satellite towers. Apparently, someone deactivated a bunch of the satellite towers that the police used to keep tabs on the city, so Yuri requests your help in getting them back in working order. By reactivating one of the towers, Spider-Man gains access to its data and uses it to get map information of that part of the city, as well as keep tabs on objectives, side quests, and backpacks? When Peter was in high school, he left a bunch of backpacks containing little collectibles from years of Spider-Man history, and these are just a fun little collectible to pick up around the city. Of course, if you collect them all, there's a fun little bonus to enjoy. Speaking of which, with a few of the towers back in motion, Spider-Man takes some time to look at the mess he's made of his suit and decides it's time to patch things up a bit. He swings by the lab and starts to get to work, but surprise!
Dr. Octavius, what you got there?
Chinese. If I know you'd be here, I would have... It's you.
I don't know what
Oh,
you're...
come on, Parker, it's obvious.
Let me explain.
I only wish you told me sooner.
I wanted to, but I was afraid that if word got out, my family might be in danger.
Huh. Yes. I guess if you design his equipment, you're bound to be a target too.
What I like about this the most is that it's hard to say whether Otto actually thinks Peter just designed Spider-Man's equipment or if he's figured it all out and is just trying to give Peter an out here. Either way, Peter wakes up the next morning and gets an email from Otto who says he's got a few ideas of his own to add to a possible new suit design, and that's where Peter gets the advanced suit. When this design was first showed off a few years ago, I was kind of hesitant about it, but honestly, I've come to really like it. The big white spider stands out really nicely, and I like the emotional ties that the suit has now, what with being designed by one of Peter's best friends and mentors. Of course, the classic and advanced suits aren't the only costumes available to you in this game. You actually have quite a few to choose from. Some original, some very obscure, and some are timeless callbacks to classic stories and adventures. One of my favorite suits is the Iron Spider armor taken from Infinity War. It just looks so nice and shiny, not to mention the cool extendable arms that come out of its back. Unfortunately, the arms are used exclusively for combat and don't have any dynamic animations for web slinging or wall crawling, but they're still pretty neat. The Iron Spider isn't the only suit with a perk though, as almost all of them have a neat little power like refilling your focus meter quickly, making you move faster, defeating enemies with the power of rock and roll. I'm not kidding.
Looks like my webs bring all the boys to the yard.
But what makes it even better is that once you've unlocked a suit, you can match up its ability with any other suit that you have, putting them all at your disposal no matter what occasion you need to dress for. You can also use tokens you get from completing side missions or busting crimes to add little bonuses to Spidey, like making his focus meter refill faster, giving him more health, or making you harder for enemies to detect during a stealth mission. And if you just want to take a moment to gaze in awe of just how insanely good these costumes and just the entire game in general looks, you can pause the gameplay at any time and enter a photo mode where you can play around with the different filters, frames, and camera angles to take some great snapshots. Can we just have a photo mode in every game, please? And I'm not kidding about how good this game looks. I mean, how much can I really say? Just look at it. The lighting, the textures, the models, the animations, everything is absolutely on point. And I know that there's kind of this controversy leading up to the release of the game where people were saying that the graphics were downgraded or whatnot. Honestly, I don't think they really were, but even if that was the case, I wouldn't care because what do I really even have to complain about? Anyway, you unlock more suits as you move along in the game. Some suits are unlocked through the narrative, some are unlocked by completing certain tasks, but others are added to your wardrobe depending on what level you are. See, by beating up thugs, completing storm missions, taking pictures of popular landmarks, basically anything under that obnoxious yellow thing in the sky people call the sun, you earn experience. With enough experience points, Spider-Man will level up, increasing his speed, power, durability, health, stuff like that, and of course, unlock new suits, but then they also need to be purchased using those tokens we talked about before. This adds a feeling of constant progression and gives the player a sense of reward for going out of their way to perform tasks outside of the main story. But I guess Insomniac decided that Spider-Man still wasn't well enough equipped yet. Yuri contacts Spider-Man and tells him that Fisk's men are still running criminal activities through one of his legitimate businesses, construction. Spidey shows up to one of the construction sites and gets a message from Otto, who has attached some designs of a gadget he's included with the new suit. That being a type of webbing with a bit more impact that can be used to stick thugs to walls instantly. Gadgets are unlocked as the story progresses and ranges from little drones that fly around and attack enemies to my personal favorite, trip mines that can be used to zip enemies to nearby walls or even get them stuck stuck together. These, as well as your base web shooters, can be upgraded through those tokens, which seem to be an almighty currency handed down from the ether. Use them wisely, use them often, and you'll be unstoppable. Once Spider-Man brings everyone on the construction site together and makes sure they're all nice and cozy, Yuri tells him that someone called about all the commotion and now the police can move in to investigate with probable cause. She tells you to try to keep an eye out for any other criminal bases that you might find around the city, adding a little bit of variety to the typical web-swinging, crime-fighting fanfare. Spidey gets a call from a man named Martin Lee who runs a sort of homeless and unemployed rehabilitation center called Feast that Aunt May happens to work at. Martin tells Peter that they're getting ready for something and they need him to come down when he's able. The wall crawler arrives at Feast and after getting into some more appropriate clothes, finds Lee, who tells him to try to distract May while they try to get prepped up. Peter does his best to keep Aunt May occupied and man, I just love this version of her. She's so sincere and likable and honestly, there's something about her that kind of reminds me of my mom, probably because of how hard the poor woman works and takes on more than she probably should. Once Martin and the rest of the crew are ready, Aunt May turns around and sees that the Feast staff have put together a party for her in appreciation of everything that she's done to help the establishment in the past 5 years since she joined them. You can see that there's a great amount of respect that Martin Lee has for her and considers their friendship very valuable. It's nice to see the tender moments like this, and I think it's one of the better ways I've seen Aunt May incorporated into his story, giving her some real purpose in the narrative's universe. Peter can't stay to celebrate for long though, as his phone starts to buzz and he sees that he's getting a call from Yuri. He heads out and checks the voicemail she left to see what's up. Apparently, a silent alarm at one of Fisk's old auction houses tripped and Yuri wants him to go see what's going on. When he arrives, he sees some creepy looking dudes wearing masks interrogating a woman who works there, asking about some kind of file. Spidey pursues, but doesn't want to alert the thugs in case they end up hurting the hostage. He's stealthy, but not exactly invisible. Just when it looks like he's in trouble,
Hey, Pete. MJ?
So Mary Jane is here because she's been working as a reporter at the Daily Bugle after Peter and eventually even Jameson both left, and it's established pretty quickly that these two little dorks were in a relationship at one point, but haven't really been together in a while. Still, what exactly was she reporting on before these thugs showed up? Well, welcome to the part of the game where you stop playing as Spider-Man and start messing around as other characters. Ooh boy. Alright, that reaction might be a little overdramatic, but I do feel a bit conflicted about how these sections are handled. This part starts off simple enough. Mary Jane tricks the employee in the auction house into thinking she's just there to snag a few pictures for a fluff piece of some kind, but is really trying to see if she can get some more information on Fisk's shady habits. Eventually, she needs to sneak her way past the woman and find her way into Fisk's old office to investigate a strange statue that's hiding in there. These little character stealth sections work just fine, but they're really not very difficult and at times feel a little mindless. And they can often be so short that I'm left to wonder why the developers even bothered. There's also a bit too many of them, but I'll elaborate on that later. So MJ makes her way into the office and fiddles around with the statue in an almost nostalgic kind of puzzle if you've ever played the early Resident Evil games, and opens a drawer containing a file about something called Devil's Breath.
Alright, remember that name, because it's gonna be on the exam.
Just then, those mask-wearing mobsters show up and start asking about the statue, prompting MJ to get the heck out of there since she's got the file they seem to be looking for, which catches us up to where we are now. Mary Jane needs to get this file into the right hands safely, so Spider-Man tells her to lay low until he's able to take the masked man out. And now my Metal Gear senses are tingling because, boys and girls, it's time for some stealth. From the shadows, Spider-Man can grab enemies off the ground with his webbing and tie them up onto his perch. Of course, sneaking up from behind enemies on foot and tagging them does the trick too. You have this neat little indicator here that will show you if an enemy is safe to take down too. This way you know if webbing up a guard is going to alert the others, which is nifty. If a guard isn't close enough to you or you want to separate a group, you can shoot a web on the ground, a wall, or on an object to make one of the enemies check it out. Spider-Man works really well as a stealth character and he's a ton of fun to play as in these sections, but later they get to play around with that idea even more. So Spidey is able to get through the majority of the masked thugs, but one of them finds Mary Jane and the webhead has to act quickly to keep her and the auction house lady alive. Unfortunately, some of the masked men get away with the file MJ picked up and there isn't enough time to go after them right now. While beating up some of the maniacs, we discover that whoever these guys are, they have some mysterious kind of energy-based superpower and can even graft it onto weapons they use, making them a bit more dangerous than your average Joe. Even that isn't enough to stop the man who can do whatever a spider can, and soon the thugs are all laid out for a little nap. Spidey takes one of the masks and heads out, and MJ tries to get what info she can before leaving. Peter and MJ meet up at their favorite restaurant and try to catch up a little bit. Peter gets to talk a little bit about everything everything that he and Otto have been working on, and MJ notes that this is something he's really truly passionate about, and there are very few things out there that can excite Peter more than his job as Spider-Man. This little conversation between these two characters is great, and I love the amount of chemistry that Yuri Lowenthal and Laura Bailey have playing Peter and Mary Jane respectively. These two are wonderful together, and apparently, I'm not the only one who thinks so.
Love seeing you two together again. You always were my favorites.
Yuri calls up the web slinger and tells him that the Shocker is out and about again and doing that whole robbing thing, so Spidey pursues him and catches him pretty quickly. So yeah, a character chase sequence, but one that's actually visually and mechanically interesting, so I don't just not hate it, I actually really like it. Why did it take it so long for this to happen? Shocker gets taken away by the police, but they weren't able to figure out what his ultimate motive was beyond just getting money. With that out of the way, Peter takes the mask he picked up over to Feast and asks Martin Lee about it since he has a degree in art history. Lee tells Peter that the mask reflects stories that his father read to him as a child about demons, and tells Pete that whoever these people are, they're dangerous and should be avoided at all costs. Shortly thereafter, Peter gets a call from Otto reminding him that they have a fitting today, trying to give a war veteran one of their prosthetic arms, and our hero rushes over to Octavius Industries to help out. Trouble rears its head though as the grant committee shows up and declares the site a safety hazard and starts clearing out their equipment. To make matters worse, the mayor pops in and wow, somebody actually voted for Norman Osborn to be mayor. Like, at least several people. Osborn tells Otto that he's tried to have his back and overlook a lot of their hazardous conditions as the two men have a bit of a history, but their experiments have gotten out of hand and he can't keep funding their research. He offers Otto a job over at Oscorp and even takes over their client, but Otto refuses, considering it insulting to work under such a corrupt man. Norman seems to know Peter pretty well, what with his son Harry having been one of Pete's best friends.
This is opportunity knocking.
Without the funding from the grant committee, Otto can't pay Peter anymore, so it looks like the two men are out of a job. Peter ends up leaving, but is reminded that before Harry left for his trip to Europe however long ago, he tried establishing some research outposts around the city and left Peter some details on how to help make sure that they work properly and do enough good so Oscorp doesn't cut them off. This doesn't have a whole lot of plot significance, but it serves as another side quest to keep an eye out for around the city, and it helps establish some history between Peter and Harry, and how Harry was trying to continue his mother's work after her death and before he ended up having to leave the country. These little research outposts will have Spider-Man trying to prove that Harry's research is actually going somewhere, and showing our Wallcrawler either collecting samples of dangerous gases that certain vehicles have been outputting into the city's air, or messing around with Spidey's little robotic drones. While the Webhead is trying to help get these research stations approved though, he gets a call from Yuri, who tells him that one of her officers started acting possessed and released the Shocker from his cell, who's already trying to rob another bank.
When will you learn that your actions have consequences?
The guard was glowing or something when he was in his little trance and apparently killed himself after the deed was done, cutting off any loose ends. Spider-Man arrives at the bank and tries to get information out of the Shocker, who reveals that the reason he's back in the robbing game is because those creepy masked men are forcing him to help them get funding or they'll kill him. Spidey is able to subdue the Shocker and tells Yuri the bad news, dubbing the masked men the Demon Gang. It seems as though the demons are trying to take advantage of the vacuum left in the city's crime network after Fisk's arrest, and Yuri informs him that they're even trying to secure some of the Kingpin's loose assets at one of his old warehouses. Spidey arrives and clears the place out of guards, and an officer named Jefferson Davis pops in to lend a hand in seeing what evidence they can find in there. The two men are able to discover an underground bunker, but the demons have beaten them to the punch and are already making off with a bunch of Fisk's old weaponry, stocking up with guns, rocket launchers, that kind of stuff. The two men try to pursue the demons, but one of them tries to use the chaos that their chase ensued to pull a fast one on Spidey, who gets saved in a quick act of heroics from Officer Davis. MJ shows up and Peter tries to warn her about how dangerous the demons are, but she's not ready to give up on the story and chases after Davis for an interview. Feeling like he's had enough excitement for a little while, Peter tries to return to his apartment for a little snooze, but
come on.
Peter Parker's life sucks. His now former landlord threw out a bunch of his stuff, including a flash drive holding 8 years worth of Spider-Man research and info, and he tries to track down the garbage truck that took it, leading to an endearing segment where Peter tries to track down the garbage truck with the help of one of the sanitation dispatchers. They keep running into dead ends, but instead of sounding more impatient with Peter as their little mission keeps going like I expected, the dispatcher seems to get more involved and seems to really care about helping out this total stranger, and it's worth noting that he has no way of knowing that he's talking to Spider-Man during this section. He's just a really chill chill guy. Peter is eventually able to track down the truck and gets his stuff before it's thrown into an incinerator and helps take out some thugs that were trying to jump the truck drivers. Mission successful, but the poor guy is still out of a place to sleep. He shuffles his options a little bit, even considering asking to crash on MJ's couch, but he gets an anonymous phone call from someone who has a little errand for him to run.
Hey there, Spider. Long time no see.
No. No. No, 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 no! Okay, so we actually don't end up seeing Black Hat in this game.
Until the DLC drops later this month.
This is really just another side quest. By traveling to these little outposts that Felicia sets up, Spidey tries to piece together what her plan is by finding all the locations she's been stealing from recently. As you continue this little side quest, we establish that Spider-Man and Black Cat, of course, have a little bit of a history, and he was able to convince her to go straight, at least for a bit. What's neat is that when you complete the mission later on in the game, you find out that she was just sending you on a wild goose chase to keep you busy while she broke into a precinct and got all of her old gear back and was playing you like a little web-strung fiddle. I really didn't mind how she was included in the game this time around, which is interesting because she's actually not seen visually at all. There's plenty of visual nods to her, and her little voicemails tell a bit about what her character is like in this particular story, but I think it was a neat way to fit her in here, and I'm glad somebody was finally able to do something with Black Cat that wasn't just chasing her around. Now, I can already hear some of you typing, yeah, I know that's gonna change once the DLC drops later, and yeah, I'm gonna make a couple of videos covering the DLC once they're dropped, but that's a task for another day. Back on track though. After finding her first outpost, Spidey really needs to figure out something and eventually gets a call from Aunt May, and he ends up spilling the beans on what a rough day it's been between losing his apartment and his job, but leaves out the whole crime-fighting vigilante bit. May offers for him to come by Feast and sleep on the couch in her office, which he gladly accepts, waking up to find a bit of money that she left for him and a request to be a bit more open when he needs help instead of always trying to carry the weight of the world on his own. He gets an update from MJ, who tells him that Mayor Osborn is prepping to honor Jefferson Davis at his rally later that day at City Hall.
Oh, I see what he's doing.
Yeah, we all do.
Davis has some news for the Spider himself though, and informs him that there's been a bit of a commotion reported at one of Wilson Fisk's construction sites, and the wall crawler goes to check it out, noticing a truck for consolidated shipping leaving the site before hearing gunfire. Spidey investigates, and it looks like the demons are trying to move in on Kingpin's territory, trying to gain control of all of his assets. Spidey saves one of Fisk's men before taking his phone and having a little chat with Fisk himself.
Nice jumpsuit. Slimming.
Stay out of my business.
Wait, the demons. Who's their leader?
Keep my men alive and maybe I'll tell you.
This section is awesome. You've got several places all over the site where Fisk's men are pinned down, and you can jump around them in any order and save them all. Soon though, a helicopter shows up carrying some demons, and Spidey follows trying to see if he can pin down their leader. They start to get away though, and Spider-Man tries to stop them with iffy results.
No, 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 no!
Spidey tries to get a handle of the crumbling construction equipment and chases down the helicopter. This chase is great, and it's one of my favorite action set pieces in the game, even weaving you through the indoor and outdoor areas at one point. Spider-Man is able to take down the helicopter with a bit of trouble and a whole lot of webbing. That's when we're introduced to Miles Morales, who happens to be the son of Jefferson Davis and a pretty big fan of our wall crawler. We don't spend much time with him yet, he's really just here to establish who he is and that he's on his way to his dad's ceremony. We get to see a little bit of the family interacting, but there's one thing I still want to know. So, Miles Morales and Jefferson Davis, son and father? Why do they have different last names? This is never explained, and yeah, I mean, okay, I have a different last name than my parents, but that's because I'm adopted. Wait, is Miles adopted? Does this even matter? You know what, no, probably not, but it's bugging me, and now it might bug you too. So Peter and Mary Jane show up to the ceremony as well, but trouble is afoot as Mayor Osborn tries to make jokes during his speech.
Well, thanks, Jim. Couldn't have said it better myself, but I'll try.
Boo! You stink!
And then receives a mysterious phone call from a threat unknown.
People will beg you for help, but you won't be able to save them.
Listen, jackass, I get threats like this twice a week. Why don't you grow a pair and tell me what you want?
To watch you suffer.
Suddenly, disaster. A group of people around the ceremony start showing off similar ghostly attributes of the demons and begin detonating their explosive vests. Officer Davis tries to save who he can, Peter gets knocked out, and everyone scrambles to escape. Now, we have a short stealth mission as Miles where he's trying to rescue his parents, and this is one instance where I can kind of see what they were going for here. Miles isn't Spider-Man. He's just a kid trying to help people he cares about and is totally powerless to combat the literal terrorists that are raining death on the city, and with Peter unconscious in the background, you feel how it affects the normal people in the city when Spider-Man isn't there to help them. The demons suddenly seem a lot more intimidating because now we see what it's like when you can't just run in and take a bunch of them down. If they see you, you're dead, and I think it adds some gravity to the stakes of the story. Well, Miles does get seen, but the thug ready to kill him gets called off by the leader of the demons, Martin Lee. Miles loses his father, the city has lost one of its greatest public figures, and our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is left in the wake of it all, stricken with grief that he wasn't able to save all the people the demons killed. At the funeral for Davis, Peter tries to comfort Miles, but the poor kid has just had his entire world shattered, and it's a bit hard to reach him right now. Also, this is a great time to get some really moody and cool pictures in photo mode. Spidey calls up Yuri and tries to convince her that he knows Martin Lee is behind everything, but she tells him that there just isn't enough incriminating evidence yet, as Miles seems to be the only one that saw Lee at the crime scene. Spider-Man decides to hunt down the delivery truck that he saw driving away from the construction site and finds with some investigation that the demons have been setting up outposts all over the city to build explosives and are planning a calculated strike on Norman Osborn's campaign offices. Soon though, our web-slinging detective is attacked by a group of mercenaries called Sable International.
Nice entrance. Solid 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
They try to apprehend Spider-Man, but Yuri arrives to try to clear things up. Apparently, Osborn hired Silver Sable and her crew to help in the fight against the demons, but Sable makes it pretty clear that if Spidey gets in their way, she'll happily drop him too, because our webhead didn't already have enough on his plate, I guess. Sable lets him go, and he decides that with everything the demons are planning, he needs to find a way to prove that Martin Lee is leading them, and fast. So he decides to head to Feast and break into the guy's office, finding every bit of proof he could hope for. He even finds the folder for this mysterious Devil's Breath stuff that keeps coming up. Spidey lets Yuri know about what he found, and judging by what's in the folder, Devil's Breath seems to be a compound created by Oscorp that could potentially be a bioweapon of some kind. Yuri tells him that they'll move in to investigate, and Pete gets a call from Otto, who apparently has a plan to get out of their whole unemployed conundrum. He called in some favors, took out some loans, and is now working on not only repairing the human body, but trying to find ways to improve it. Otto tries to test it out, but something goes wrong, and his hands just don't seem to be responding the way he needs them to, and he has a little bit of a breakdown. He chalks it up to his frustration with their current situation and how Norman betrayed him, and goes on to explain that he and Norman were actually lab partners in college, but Norman eventually stole the company they tried to create together and left him in the dust. Still, it seems like there's a bit more than that going on, but Peter leaves it alone and tries to focus on getting the prosthetics working again, and the two men have a moment of hope, seeing the foundation of their world-changing research forming. Peter catches up with MJ that night, and the two have dinner, while Mary Jane tells him about how she tried to do some investigation of her own in the demon case, and come on! So trudge through another stealth mission as MJ and start to see the cracks form as you realize just how stupid some of the AI is in this game. But by the end of it, you'll be treated to something kind of neat. The people working in this warehouse are not the demons, but they do seem to be in league with them. So who's in charge of this little crew?
Tombstone.
Oh man, I can't tell you how excited I was to see Tombstone finally being brought into a Spider-Man game. He's such a cool character and is just not used enough. Sure, he doesn't have world-ending powers or anything, but his aggressive demeanor and his unbreakable skin still make him quite the threat, and it's nice to see him getting some love here. MJ snags a GPS tracker that Tombstone had laying around and flash forward to the here and now, and she gives the tracker to Peter, figuring he can use it to track whatever they're trying to ship. The two try to take a little bit of time to just enjoy the evening and maybe start piecing their relationship back together, but that's just not how Peter's life works, and we get one of my favorite little interactions in the game.
Hey, it's your crime system thingy. Looks like a residential break-in.
Charles Standish.
That sounds familiar. Oh, Oscorp CFO. Wait, you don't think this has anything to do with Lee, do you?
Sorry to cook and run.
Did you just leave your clothes on the kitchen floor?
Mary Jane Watson, asking the real questions. So Spider-Man tries to respond to Yuri's message and finds out that the demons have broken into an apartment complex home to one Charles Standish, who seems to have been someone who worked on the Devil's Breath project at Oscorp. Spidey swoops in and saves the poor nerd, but he doesn't get much time to talk to Standish as Sable International chimes in and takes protective custody of the man. Still, he was able to find out that the demons were also looking for a man named Isaac Delaney, who MJ tracks down at a Halloween party over at a local university. I love this section too. It's fun seeing all these college students dressed up, and it's a creative way to work in some kind of pseudo cameos from a few of Spider-Man's villains as Spidey tries to track down Dr. Delaney.
Hey, what's wrong with you? I worked on that helmet for a week.
The wall crawler isn't quite fast enough though, as the demons show up and drag him inside. Spider-Man pursues, cuts out the lights, dances with a few thugs, and tries to catch up with the good doctor. The rescue, however, doesn't really go all that well.
His name, Dr. Morgan Michaels.
Spider-Man frantically tries to capture Lee, but Mr. Monochromatic here shows off his ability to take over people and starts sending random college students after the webhead, giving him enough time to escape. He's not sure who this Morgan Michaels guy that Dr. Delaney mentioned is, but MJ agrees to try to figure it out. The web slinger decides that his best bet is to try to get a step ahead of the demons and try to break into Norman Osborn's office directly and look for information on his own. Once inside, he discovers that the Devil's Breath was created by Oscorp in a secret lab put together by Wilson Fisk and was originally designed as a sort of mega-cure, something that could heal just about anybody of anything. But the substance they ended up creating was far from a cure-all and more of a kill-all. If the Devil's Breath gets out into the air, even if one person gets infected by it, it could turn into a global epidemic. So basically the setup for the current Planet of the Apes movies. Mary Jane tries to sneak her way into the Sable International camp that's holding Standish to try to get some more information from him, and it makes me want to cry. She makes it to Standish, but Spidey also shows up because he was worried about her getting caught and actually kind of messes up the whole interrogation business.
What the? Oh, that was not a Sable guy.
Mary Jane was able to find out that the demons are interested in Grand Central Station, but thanks to the spider's little stunt, that's all she knows. She's understandably upset with Peter and needs some time to cool off, so Pete swings by the lab to see how Otto is holding up. Pretty well, as it turns out. He needs Peter to help him work out some kinks with their neural interface, but once that's done, it seems like all their hard work is really starting to pay off.
I'd call that a mild success.
I call that unbelievable.
This amazing moment only lasts so long though, as Otto finally has to reveal to Peter what's been going on with him.
My doctors call it a degenerative neurological disorder. Probably caused by overexposure to toxic chemicals in my reckless youth.
Sorry, is there anything I can do?
You already are. The worst part is, it only affects the muscles. The mind continues to work, but it can no longer do.
This makes his dedication to creating these prosthetics so much more important and, in a way, much more tragic. Still, it is a happy moment, as this is one great step closer to the two friends finally achieving what they've been working so hard towards. Although, it is a little concerning. The interface that Otto wants to develop for controlling his prosthetics is risky, and it could even tamper with his behavior and memory, but Peter is convinced that if they tread carefully, they can make it work. Otto isn't the only one Peter is worried about though, as he talks to Aunt May about getting Miles a job over at Feast to help keep him busy as he's trying to sort everything out. Miles seems to like the idea, but he runs into some trouble with a couple of hotshots, and Spidey finds him just in time to help out and even give Miles a quick little lesson in combat.
Only this time, just let me have it. Right on the job, okay? I can take it. Oh,
NANI?!
Then the game decides that we really want to see Miles try to sneak through a Sable International checkpoint and show off this little hacking app he has, but I would really rather not that. Miles makes it to Feast, and Peter tries to help get him adjusted to everything. After making sure he's comfortable, he sets Miles up with May and heads out to go take care of some more Spidey work. He hears that Sable International has found Dr. Michaels and are now trying to transport him to a safe place before the demons go after him, and decides he should tag along in case something happens. And wouldn't you just know it? The demons show up and try to chase down Michaels as he has the Devil's Breath with him, and Spider-Man does his best to keep up with the guy after he's been kidnapped, leading to a fantastic car chase sequence. And when our hero tries to rescue the Doctor, we see Martin Lee try to take over Spider-Man's mind, tormenting him with the fact that he couldn't save everyone at the City Hall bombing. Spidey is able to overcome Mr. Negative's influence though, and is able to stop the truck. Dr. Michaels makes it out of the wreckage, but so do the demons, and with the Devil's Breath at that.
So-called superhero. You think you save people, but you just make it worse. This is your fault.
My fault? He was under your protection. You really need 2 of those?
Man, Silver Sable is awesome in this game. Dr. Michaels is taken by Sable International, but he's able to get a hold of a radio and contact Spider-Man, telling him that he's remorseful, as he's just as responsible as Norman for everything that's happened since he helped develop Devil's Breath in the first place. He then tells Spidey that the most likely place for the Devil's Breath to be released is in a large transit area with a lot of people, as the disease would spread like a wildfire there, and Spidey tries to give MJ a heads up, but she's actually already 2 steps ahead of him and decides to go check out an Oscorp exhibit being displayed at Grand Central Station. She finds a mechanism on display called the Gaia Microbe Dispersal Device, which was designed to clean oceans and rivers, but Martin Lee shows up to take the device as it would be the perfect way to disperse the Devil's Breath. He and his thugs lock down the Grand Central Station and try to lure Mayor Osborn there, as Lee wants him to be there at ground zero for this epidemic. Clearly, this guy has some sort of grudge. Mary Jane is able to contact Peter though, and it's not long before he arrives to break up the party. Now this right here is the best stealth mission in the game. You move around as Mary Jane and try to disable the demon drones and such, all the while signaling Spider-Man to come down and take out the thugs, which is a super fun spin on the stealth takedowns we've seen in a lot of games. It's a good way of showing off how cool Spider-Man is and lets us see what he's like doing his thing from the eyes of a third party. And you still get to control when and where he strikes, so you don't feel detached from what he's doing. With the two working together, Spider-Man and MJ are able to free the hostages, disable the Devil's Breath, and knock out all the demons. The Iraq Knight catches up to Lee on a subway train and is finally able to take him down. Spidey tries to stop the train, but when movie references apparently aren't working, he decides on some more drastic measures.
Yuri, they still doing construction on 42nd and 1st?
Street's closed for another month. Why?
Martin Lee is taken to the raft with all the other crazies, and Mary Jane and Peter try to work out some of the issues they've been having. Namely that Mary Jane feels almost trapped around him, like she can't do anything on her own, which honestly is not an unfounded complaint, especially since she was doing just fine by herself when she was trying to contact Standish and, well, you know.
Oh!
So Peter checks in with Otto, who decided to stretch beyond basic human anatomy, and yeah, we all saw this coming, but still, it's kind of troubling to see a character we've come to really like go down a path that we all know leads to villainy. Peter takes a look at the interface and sees that it's incredibly dangerous and tries to warn Otto, but the old man lashes out, afraid of the little time he has left to get this right. He calms down a bit, but it's clear that creating his new arms has been leading up to something much bigger than he's cared to tell. Peter checks on Aunt May to see how everything at Feast is holding up, but sees on the news that someone has attacked the police truck carrying Devil's Breath, and when Spidey arrives to see what happened, realizes that Rikers Island is under attack. He hitches a ride with Yuri to get a handle on the situation, but everything is already in chaos. Whoever set things in motion was apparently trying to keep Spider-Man and the police distracted while they started breaking out some of the big baddies out of the raft. Yuri and Spidey try to make their way over, but that's when it's revealed that Electro is out and he attacks their helicopter. Spider-Man tries to get Yuri to safety and tries to chase after Electro, but then one by one, more of Spider-Man's most deadly villains are escaping, and Electro, Rhino, Scorpion, Vulture, and Mr. Negative all square up against Spider-Man and start beating the tar out of him. But where did they get their fancy new tech? How was such an elaborate breakout even orchestrated? Well, it all turns out that Octavius was behind all of it, which has actually been hinted at nearly the entire game after Norman cut the funding at the lab. Sketches and blueprints are all laid out, even 3D printed parts of the new armor for the villains were being made by Otto quite a while before this happened. Otto has effectively become Dr. Octopus and gives Spider-Man a warning to back off and stay out of the way while he puts the rest of his plan in motion.
So what are you doing here?
Oh, you know, just flying around.
Flying around?
Flying around.
Thwarting my plans?
Thwarting your plans?
Are you?
No.
Good, because that'd be bad.
How bad?
I'd have to kill you.
That's bad.
Indeed.
Mayor Osborn pins the blame for the outbreak on Spider-Man and makes him target number 1 for Sable International. The Sinister Six have begun raining terror on the city, and to make things as bad as they could possibly be, Otto travels to Times Square and unleashes Devil's Breath on the city. The clock is ticking now, and an awful lot of people are going to die. And by the looks of it, Aunt May is one of the infected. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Insomniac. I already imprinted the image of my mother onto this character, and now she's got a deadly virus. Feast is attacked by escaped prisoners from Rikers, and the whole building goes up in flames. Spidey saves everyone, including Miles, Mary Jane, and Aunt May, and the youngest ones out of the group try to formulate some sort of game plan.
I'm sorry I screwed things up. It's just hard being the one who always gets saved, you know? Sometimes I want to do the saving.
I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't. Still partners?
Always.
Wow, actual character development and a feeling of understanding and compromise that lays down a strong foundation for a healthy relationship. Good on you, game. Spidey tells MJ that he needs her to track down the cure Oscorp is developing for Devil's Breath, and Miles needs to try to keep the people working across the Feast locations safe. Spider-Man himself needs to track down the areas of operation for the villains and take them down as quickly as possible. He tracks down a base that Doc Ock was using to brief the group and discovers that he was playing to the specific interests of each villain in order to recruit them, like getting Rhino out of the suit he's trapped in, helping Martin Lee extract some kind of unspecified revenge on Norman Osborn, trying to help cure Vulture's spinal cancer, and of course paying Scorpion a lot of money. And Spidey is able to discover the areas each member was tasked to strike. Of course, Octavius had a feeling Spider-Man would show up there and left a little present for him. Spidey gets jumped by Vulture and Electro, and I love this setup. Not only are you fighting two villains at once, but they're also matched up to keep you on your toes. Vulture flies high and attacks from the air, while Electro stays a little closer to the ground and shoots lightning at you. This isn't a terribly difficult fight, but it doesn't need to be. It's just tons of fun. Once those bozos are taken care of, Spider-Man tries to take on the Scorpion, who's after the clean water supply of the city. Little does he know...
Me, I'd end it now. But Octavius is paying, and he wants to torture you, which I respect.
Scorpion poisons Spider-Man, and the poor wall crawler ends up haunted by the hallucinogenic the venom was filled with. The arachnid tries to travel to certain locations to develop a cure, but all the while, he's seeing a sea of poison, giant stingers, visions of Doc Ock and Scorpion, and is constantly being bombarded with everything he feels guilty about, cutting into his very core. Spider-Man is shaken, hard, but he's able to make it through.
I think I did it.
Peter then tries to take some time to see if Aunt May is holding up okay, and she's hanging in there. Pete asks where Miles is, and we play through my second favorite stealth mission in the game, where Miles is trying to grab some antibiotics for the shelter from one of the Sable camps, but when Rhino and Scorpion show up, he has to try to make it through the shipping yard while trying not to get found by the big Russian beast. I think this section is awesome, and it really helps make the Rhino seem a lot more intimidating. Once Miles escapes, he gets a nice moment to shine as a couple of escaped prisoners are trying to shake down a civilian, and he tries to put the 2 seconds of fight training Spider-Man gave him into effect.
What the hell's he saying? Not gonna be saying anything in a second. Whoa. You want a taste? Nah, I'm good, kid.
Yeah, I find it a little weird that Miles was able to take this guy out after a lesson from Spider-Man that didn't even last a minute long, but maybe this guy he was fighting was just bested by his overconfidence or something. Miles contacts Spider-Man and lets him know where Scorpion and Rhino are, and the webhead jumps right into action. Once he's at the shipping yard, Spider-Man has to take down both villains, with one moving very quickly all over the arena, and the other moving a bit slower but hitting 5 times as hard. I really like how Spider-Man ultimately uses the disdain that the two villains have for each other to his advantage, and is able to get them to fight each other and trap them. Mary Jane calls Spider-Man and tells him that she thinks the only way she's going to be able to find the lab with the anti-serum for Devil's Breath is going to be in Norman Osborn's personal files, leading us to the final stealth mission, and actually, I don't mind this one that much either. Mary Jane gets a taser and is able to actually defend herself against the Sable agent she encounters while trying to make her way into Norman's apartment. Once there, a lot of stuff is revealed. First, Harry Osborn. Throughout the game, we've heard about Harry a few times and how he's been away for a while over in Europe, but now Mary Jane discovers that he actually was very sick with the disease that killed his mother, and his trip to Europe was actually about getting him medical help. As he was getting closer to leaving, he was scared that he might not make it through. When Norman and Silver Sable show up in the apartment as well, it took some careful sneaking to get into Norman's secret lab and pinpoint the location of the anti-serum. Mary Jane also discovers some troubling information about Martin Lee. As it turns out, Martin was sick as a child and his parents experiments were working for Osborn. Norman was working with them to develop a cure, but what they ended up injecting the poor boy with was the source of his powers and the end of his parents' lives. But the mad science doesn't stop there, as apparently Oscorp was also in the business of creating genetically altered radioactive spiders, which links even Spider-Man and his abilities back to Oscorp. MJ gets startled by one of the spiders and ends up knocking something over, causing Sable to come in to investigate and an escaped creepy crawly getting onto Mary Jane. MJ tries to shake off the spider and make a quick escape, but she almost gets caught by Sable and her men, leading her to do what any sensible person in that situation would. The webhead swings in just in time to save her and get her to safety. Now knowing where Martin and Octavius must be heading, Peter is ready to go off to finish this, but not before having a great moment of reflection.
This is all my fault.
No, not this song again. You are not alone anymore, Pete. Let Miles and me look after Feast. You find Norman. You find the cure.
Thanks, partner.
Have I mentioned that these are two of the best adaptations of these characters? Because they are. Spider-Man arrives at the lab where the anti-serum is being developed, but Martin Lee has already busted his way in and taken Norman hostage. Spider-Man takes out the demons and Sable agents who attack him, and then Silver Sable shows up to try to finish the job, but Spidey is able to convince her that he isn't responsible for everything she thinks he is, and they can't save Norman without working together. Seeing how Spider-Man is willing to throw his life on the line to save a man who made him out to be a menace, her code of honor speaks to her and she agrees to work with him.
You secure Osborn. I will talk to them.
Nice to have friends.
Spidey is able to stop Martin before he kills Osborn and fights him off while trying to appeal to his humanity. He knows that somewhere in there, Martin is still a good man. He's just broken down to his core and the dark side of his power is corrupting his way of thinking. It seems like he's finally able to get through to Martin, but aren't we forgetting about someone?
Dramatic reverb.
Otto comes in and just about slaughters Spider-Man, leaving him a broken and bloody mess on the ground before taking the anti-serum and Norman away. Sable and her crew get Spider-Man to Feast, and Michaels is able to patch him up a bit, but he's still in no shape to go after Otto, especially after the totally merciless beatdown he just got. Spider-Man is beaten. But MJ convinces him that maybe the Peter Parker in him can help find a way to stop Doc Ock. Time is of the essence though, as Aunt May is barely hanging on now and everyone at Feast is hanging by a thread to help those infected by the Devil's Breath. Spider-Man swings off to create a way to stop Otto, and Miles gets visited by Mary Jane's little stowaway. When Peter arrives at the lab, he takes everything he's developed when trying to help Otto design the arms and creates his endgame. The anti-Ock suit. He rushes after Otto and the final battle is ready to conclude. Octavius brings Norman up to the top of Oscorp Tower and tries to get Osborn to confess to everything. All the lies, stealing Otto's ideas and ruining any hopes he had at a career, what they did to Martin Lee, but Norman's stubborn pride holds true.
The truth. Okay. The truth is, you were only ever worth a damn when you worked for me! The truth is, you could never accept that I'm better than you. You're a failure, Otto, and you always will be.
Spidey rescues Norman and sprints off to his fallen friend. Doc Ock and Spider-Man battle each other relentlessly, and Otto reveals that he's known for some time who Peter really was. This only fills Peter with anger as he realizes that Otto was willing to nearly destroy him in everything he cared about, knowing perfectly well that he was attacking the one person who stood by his side to the very end. Otto destroys Peter's web shooters, but the tragic battle continues to the side of the tower itself as the two men throw everything they have at one another. Otto stabs Peter with one of his arms, and Pete uses the opportunity to get the drop on Octavius and remove the controller for his neural interface. Otto plummets downward and is knocked inside by a piece of debris. Peter follows in and takes the anti-serum from Otto, and this next exchange just breaks my heart.
Men like us have a duty, a responsibility, to use our talents in the service of others. We have to do what's best for those beneath us, whether they understand it or not.
No, you're wrong! You are everything I wanted to be! You just threw it away!
That wasn't me. You said you'd never abandon me. You promised. Remember? And of course, you rest easy, knowing your secret is safe with me.
Otto has such a warped view of the lesson of power and responsibility, and I think this is an incredible example of taking the idea of a tragic villain to a somewhat different angle. The situation here is what's tragic, and the way that Otto tries to manipulate Peter at the end here makes me wonder just how much of this deranged mindset was always in him, and how much of it was actually the interface changing him. It's tough to think about, but this game isn't done abusing Peter Parker just yet.
You do what you think is best, Doc. It's all any of us can.
Peter?
Even when it hurts like hell.
Peter, where are you going? Peter? Peter!
Dr. Michaels can replicate the anti-serum to cure the city, but it will take all of the serum they have, and it's gonna take time. Time that Aunt May doesn't have. Peter is left in a position that nobody, especially him, should ever be put in. He wants so badly to save his aunt, the woman who raised him, but this is a Peter that knows that with great responsibility comes great sacrifice. Aunt May reveals that she's known Peter's secret for Lord knows how long, and our hero is left having to make the conscious choice to let this woman he cares so much about die for the sake of the city. The people of New York are cured. Aunt May is laid to rest with her husband, Otto is locked away in Rikers, and Peter and MJ decide to give their relationship another shot, letting the credits roll. Of course, it's not quite over. As with any big superhero tale these days, there are two scenes within the credits. One shows that the spider bite Miles got earlier gave him powers, leading to a heartwarming moment between him and Peter.
It's pretty weird, right? Not that weird.
The second one, however, actually changes quite a bit. We see Norman Osborn walking into a secret lab, the same one we snuck into as Mary Jane, and a tank in the back opens up to show Harry. He was right here the entire time, tangled in what almost looks like the Venom symbiote, as Norman has a rare, tender moment of humanity, proclaiming his sorrow for failing to cure his son and showing some genuine love for him. So wait, I guess if this is the same disease that killed his wife, this means that basically all of Norman's actions, especially his refusal to confess to Otto, was all to ensure he wouldn't lose the money and resources he needed to cure his wife and now Harry. So yeah, he's still totally selfish, but selfish for the sake of other people, if that makes sense? Everything considered, I think this is one of the greatest Spider-Man stories ever told. Choosing a slightly older Spider-Man was a wonderful idea, and Yuri Lowenthal totally owns the role, which I think is a little funny considering Spider-Man and Peter Parker are both very charismatic guys, and one of the roles that Yuri Lowenthal is most famous for is his performance as Sasuke from Naruto, not the first person I think of when I hear the word charisma. This is one of my all-time favorite depictions of Spider-Man, and I love how he jokes, how he acts, and how we can see his lesson of great power and great responsibility speak through him without him ever needing to utter the phrase. Mary Jane, Miles, Yuri Watanabe, Otto Octavius, and Aunt May are all wonderfully realized and utilized as well, using each character in unique and meaningful ways to tell an unforgettable story. I feel like there's still so much to talk about, but just look at how long this video has gone. It's ridiculous. I guess now you know why it took me so long to make this video, but I'll try to briefly address some of the key stuff I think is noteworthy. I wasn't quite sure where to mention this before, but while you're out in the city, a little talk show podcast hosted by J. Jonah Jameson himself will chime in where he starts yelling about Spider-Man or other craziness happening around the city, and I love it.
Okay, so not for nothing, you gotta give Spider-Man respect for taking down Wilson Fisk, right? I mean, one less mob boss is good for everyone.
Is that right? Tell me, are you a police officer? Prosecutor? Maybe an award-winning reporter with decades on the job like me?
No, I'm a plumber.
Oh, good. Then fix my toilet and shut up!
He's basically the Alex Jones of this universe, and putting him in a talk show fits unbelievably well. It's also worth noting that there are some additional side quests to take care of outside of the main story, like chasing down pigeons for a homeless guy, playing Private Eye and tracking people on subway trains, trying to track down a small-time villain called Screwball who's sending Spidey out on a wild goose chase in order to get views on her live stream, which, yeah, try telling me that wouldn't happen in today's world. But there are two strings of side quests in particular that send you after a couple of larger villains. One quest sees you finally taking down Tombstone as he's developing an inhalant based on the mixture that gave him unbreakable skin, and Spidey developing a cure for it, managing to make Tombstone vulnerable for once and taking him down in a burning garage, which was tons of fun. The other revolves around a series of challenges based around beating up thugs, taking out thugs via stealth, deactivating bombs, chasing drones, and stuff like that. Complete enough of these, and the mercenary sending you on all of these challenges shows himself, and it's Taskmaster. I adore this guy. He looks so cool, and his ability to memorize and use the fighting style of anyone he sees comes in full force here when you fight him. Complete all of the challenges and he'll show up for another round where you can take him out for good. The game does have its flaws, of course. The standout one for me is the mandatory stealth missions as Mary Jane and Miles. I wouldn't remove them entirely, but I would cut down on them for sure. If I got to restructure the game, I would keep 4 in total. Miles during the City Hall bombing, Mary Jane and Spider-Man at Grand Central Station, Miles avoiding the Rhino, and Mary Jane busting into Norman's apartment. These are the missions that I think have the best balance of remaining entertaining while still serving the plot. My issue with the other ones is that while I think they work quite well narratively, they're just not too much fun to play through, and you should never sacrifice that much of your gameplay for the sake of story. Still, considering that's like one thing that I have to bicker about in this game, I think we're still pretty well off. I have tried to be as thorough as possible in this review, but I'm sure I've still missed stuff. I'll probably be thinking about the stuff I missed as soon as this video is uploaded too, which would just be my luck, but I think for now, this will do. So, the answer might already seem pretty obvious, but do I recommend Marvel's Spider-Man? I don't think I could ever not recommend this game. It's too tightly written, so well paced, attention was poured into every little detail, and it is just so much fun. I love this game. Heck, I adore it. One good thing about how long it's taken to make this review is that I've had plenty of time to reflect on what I've seen and played. I've played through the game 3 times for recording and analysis, and I've come to a very concrete conclusion. I think Insomniac has created the best Spider-Man game ever made here. It's got the best story, the best combat, the best villains, the best web swinging, the best alternate costumes, and man, the soundtrack that John Paisano composed for this game is stellar. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Now, if you disagree, and this still isn't your favorite Spider-Man game, then you know what? Awesome. That means that you have a game that's really special to you, and one that has that polish in its mechanics that just makes it better to you. We don't all have to agree on this, but man, am I glad to say that this game was so satisfying. My friend Matt, who doesn't even like Spider-Man as a character, loves this game, and I think that says quite a bit. So true believers and newcomers alike, get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action. Well, that was certainly quite the journey. I wish I hadn't taken so long to get this last video out, but I hope it was worth the wait. I just want to thank each and every one of you that's joined me in this marathon, taking a look at Spider-Man's history in the game industry. And I've seen the community on this channel grow like 3 times over, and that's in no small part thanks to my dude over at ynSection. I'll link his channel in the description. Please go check him out, support his stuff. I'm sure a lot of you are here after seeing his recommendation anyway, but for any of you who aren't, I'd like to send you his way. I also want to thank my friends and family for being so supportive in all of this. It's been a bit of a ride. I want to thank Jake, my roommate, for creating a bunch of the assets for the channel, like my logo and the intro to all of my videos. And of course, I want to thank my wonderful girlfriend, Alexandra, who has been so patient with me while I've been obsessively working on this series. All of you really are just the best, and I look forward to making more content for you in the near future. The next video is already decided on, and it shouldn't take another month to make, and I hope that you look forward to it, but for now, just one last time, thank you. See you next mission.
Thank you for playing. Would you like to try again?